Thank you so much, AJ. Now I would like to call to the podium Linda Moulton Howe and John Burroughs. Linda is a leading researcher and journalist. John is a researcher and first-hand witness to the RAF Bentwaters events of 1980. Please welcome Linda and John.
How many are here from the media? And how many received, or did you receive a press release a year ago about a very important military disclosure concerning RAF Bentwaters? Probably not, but 11 months ago, on June 25th, 2009, I received a press release from Gary Heseltine in England in which he was releasing a statement by the deputy base commander at RAF Bentwaters, who had been involved in the December 26th to 28th, 1980 series of lights, beams, and apparently a craft in the Rendlesham Forest between the RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters huge joint UK-American base. And the press release said that Colonel Charles Halt, who was there 30 years after the event, was going on the record for the very first time to say that the events of lights, beams, and a craft were extraterrestrial in origin. Those are the exact words, quote, extraterrestrial in origin, close quote. I ended up doing a series of interviews between the summer of 2009 coming up to this day with at least a dozen men and a woman who was there at RAF Bentwaters, following up on the deputy base commander announcing that the lights, the beam, and the craft were extraterrestrial in origin. What is remarkable to me as a longtime investigative reporter and TV producer is that that press release was not picked up on the UK side or on the American side in terms of, let's say, the New York Times. I and others have reported and interviewed Colonel Halt. But if you take that statement that he finally said 30 years later and said with frustration that he felt like he and several of the men who served under him were left to hang out to dry by higher command because of those events, the 26th to the 28th, then I, as an investigative reporter, trying to find out what is the bottom of this remarkable story and what are the implications, I can report to you today that one of the more astonishing aspects is an insight that when something, we'll call it in the nature of using his terms, something that may be in the extraterrestrial category, occurs, that the reaction on that big base was for higher authority to say nothing happened. And what did it do? It left the men and the few women who were there serving the United States with no backup, no explanation, no inquiry, and in fact, only 1 month ago, for the very first time, I was able to interview and discuss to a man named Rick Bobo. He was a sergeant, and he was 50 feet up in the air in a weapons storage area tower that was overlooking one of the big secrets there, that WSA at Bentwaters had nuclear weapons. His responsibility is nothing can interact. And yet, the interview that astonished me is not a single person ever briefed or debriefed, either way, ever came to him and explained what was a full moon-sized red-blue light hanging in the sky for 2 hours without motion, sending down a small light into Rendlesham Forest, and each time that he called Central Security Control to report worrying about the nuclear weapons in the WSA and being told it's being handled. Well, what was being handled? It was Deputy Base Commander Charles Halt out in Rendlesham Forest with about 30-some men, and one of them with me today was Airman First Class John Burroughs. He was in Rendlesham Forest on December 26th and December 28th. And over the last 30 years, he and some of the men who were there, they have been troubled mentally, spiritually, and physically. And they don't have answers from anyone about what happened in that forest. If it was extraterrestrial in nature, why did it take the deputy base commander 30 years to say that? And they are left still hanging with no answers, no backup, and no protection from the United States Air Force. And I would like to introduce former Airman First Class John Burroughs, who was in the Air Force for 27 years, left as a tech sergeant, and he himself feels strongly about the men that he served with and what happened.
Thank you. As she said, my name is John Burroughs. I was involved in an incident in the Rendlesham Forest that took place in December of 1980. At the time, the base was the largest TAC fighter wing in the United States Air Force. Okay, so it's the largest TAC fighter wing in the United States Air Force. The incident took place in the forest outside of Woodbridge Air Force Base. It's an incident that a retired Major General Gordon Williams has now gone on record as stating this: I can neither confirm or deny that this incident took place, but I will say there were good men doing their jobs. The deputy base commander, who also was a first-hand witness, who was in the forest, leading an investigation, has now gone on record, as Linda said in a press conference last year, stating it was an ET event. An admiral of the fleet, Lord Hill Norton, also went on record as saying that the British government, who did a report on this incident, said it was of no defense significance. Yet the admiral of a fleet in England stated he had to be of defense significance. So at this time, I would like to call for the Obama administration to release all information and documents they have on that incident, and also finally end the truth embargo and do disclosure on all events. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda and John. And now I'd like to ask Richard Dolan to please come forward. And Richard is an historian. He's the author of UFOs and the National Security State, Volumes 1 and 2, among other publications. So, Richard.
Good morning. I've been researching and writing about unidentified aerial objects or unidentified flying objects for about 15 years. I'm here to provide you with information on the status of the historical trilogy that I'm writing on the subject, and also to tell you about another study that I am co-authoring, which will be available later this year. First, my historical research. This is a trilogy entitled UFOs and the National Security State. The first volume, published in 2000 and revised in 2002, covers the history of the UFO phenomenon and cover-up from 1941 to 1973. And during the summer of 2009, I completed the second volume of this study, providing a comprehensive history and guide to the phenomenon between the years 1973 and 1991, that is, the end of the Cold War. And so far, these two volumes total well over 1,000 pages. They are carefully researched, and despite the sensational nature of the subject matter itself, cautious in drawing conclusions. And yet, a meticulous review of the thousands of pages of documents released by the United States government and other governments from around the world make it undeniably clear that the phenomenon of UFOs is real. And whatever one wants to make of the actual source behind the mystery is another matter, and that, of course, makes for interesting discussion. Yet the historical record is becoming very clear on this matter. As the United States Air Force General Nathan Twining said in a classified memo in 1947, the phenomenon is real, not visionary or fictitious. Indeed. General Twining, just a few years later, went on to become U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff. He wasn't kidding. 60-plus years of military encounters have shown us conclusively that the militaries of the United States and of many other nations have engaged objects that are not supposed to exist, that are doing things that are not supposed to be possible. Nearly without exception, historians and other professional academicians continue to dismiss this embarrassing and unpleasant topic. And so it is very unpleasant. There is, however, unfortunately for them, an unpleasant and problematic core of documented reality to the matter of UFOs. It will not go away. What General Twining said in a classified memo more than 60 years ago has now been amply proven through historical research. The third and concluding volume of this study is on target for completion in the year 2012. To be sure, it will take some serious hustle and energy on my part to make that happen, but I believe it is within the realm of what I can do. It is my goal in writing this trilogy to provide a clear and comprehensive historical record on what is undeniably the greatest mystery of our time. But, and this leads to my second announcement, the UFO phenomenon is more than a mystery. It is the harbinger of what I believe will be radical, even revolutionary change in our world. The continual, rapid transformation of our society, which has been occurring for the past several decades, is going to lead to an opening in the secrecy. It's a tidal wave that cannot be stopped. And this is the theme of a forthcoming book that will be out this fall called AD, After Disclosure. I'm co-authoring this book with Bryce Zabel, who was the creator and producer of the television show Dark Skies. This book will be the first extensive, nuts and bolts examination of what our world will be like, or may look like, after the disclosure of the ET reality. It examines the most credible, most likely scenarios of how an official disclosure might take place, under what conditions it is most likely to take place, the kinds of statements most likely to be made, and the certainty of spin that will be used on the subject. The book also provides a brief history of the UFO phenomenon itself, the history of secrecy, the probable contours of the black budget world that controls this secret, the conditions most likely to spark the need for a public admission, that is, how will the secret end, a study of the possibilities of exactly who these other beings may be, that is, who has been behind the UFO phenomenon, the challenges of political blowback and changes and disruptions to our global infrastructure, the new normality that will undoubtedly arise in the wake of disclosure, the new exopolitics that will also arise, and the deep changes that are likely to affect our civilization after the initial shock and awe has subsided. This is the cover of the book as of right now. Kind of a neat cover, American flag, ET image behind it, AD After Disclosure. This book will be published and available for online orders at midnight Eastern Standard Time as September 23rd turns to September 24th. Literally the stroke of midnight. We picked the date for a reason. September 23rd, 1947 is the day that General Nathan Twining wrote that UFOs were real. A day later, on September 24th, 1947, President Harry S. Truman may have officially established the highly classified group that has managed UFO secrecy for all these many years. 1947 was the year of Roswell, the year that UFOs first exploded into public consciousness as the so-called flying saucers. That was 63 years ago. And 63 years is a long time to keep this kind of a secret. My co-author, Bryce Zabel, and I hope that by writing AD after disclosure, that many others will join in the discussion of its implications through our blog, afterdisclosure.com. By engaging the issues in the way that we're doing, we hope that the world of AD, or after disclosure, will soon come to us all. One final statement here, or announcement. If we consider that the battle for UFO disclosure is a political movement, which it is, then it's a political movement that has been without a proper song or anthem for a little too long. Bryce has written what I think is going to be that song. It's called Need to Know. Need to Know, the UFO disclosure song, performed by the accomplished singer Cherish Alexander. This is a great song. It's on iTunes. The reviews are coming in. They're all extremely positive. You can learn more about that song at ufodisclosuresong.com. I would like to encourage you to look for periodic updates on the status of AD after disclosure, as well as the third volume of UFOs and the National Security State at my website, keyholepublishing.com, especially as the book AD nears completion in September. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard. Next, I'd like to ask how's this? Yeah. All right. Sure. You don't think that was a conspiracy, do you? You do? Okay. Me too. Next, I'd like to ask filmmaker Terje Toftenes from Norway to come forward with a brief statement that he'd like to share with you.
Just a second. Oops. Well, first of all, thank you all for having this opportunity to be here and both document this historic event that Steve, again, has been able to put together, and also for the ability to say something to you. I come from Norway, and so we have to apologize my English. But Norway is a country where there has been a substantial amount of UFO sightings over the years. We have particularly one place in Norway called Hessdalen that some of you might know. That is a place where there has been an enormous amount of UFO sightings for the last 25 years, or even 30 years. And on this place, UFOs have been seen regularly, coming up the valley every night at 8 o'clock, going into a mountain or down into a lake, coming back 2 hours later down the mountains, so you could almost clock them in. And there has been seen a lot of lights. There has been seen craft, large craft. There has been seen lights following cars. And they also have emissioned a very bad taste of or smell of sulfur. strangely enough. And well, I won't go into details, but the stories about these UFOs and these lights are immense. We have also made a documentary on that particular case, or that from that valley, or the cases from that valley, called the Heseltine phenomenon. Well, my interest in UFOs have gone far way back. For the last 30 years, I've been working both with the Norwegian Broadcasting Company as a producer, and also with my own company, doing films for the Norwegian industries and the oil industry in particular. But over the last years, I have tried to produce films within this realm of the new paradigm. So that's why my company is called New Paradigm Films. We have now recently released, or are finishing a film that will be released on May 30th, called The Day Before Disclosure, which is still in production. We showed a pre-screening of it here on the first night of the conference. And we're now going to go back and do the final editing with some additional interviews that we were able to do here as well. So we hope that it will be a film that will be a help in the process of making this whole issue more known to the public. The film is aimed at people who actually don't have too much insight in this in the first place. So we hope to get it on TV, both nationally in Norway and also around the world. And it's a film that will show some of the main cases and also have interviews with the main researchers, both in the US and elsewhere in the world, presenting this in a hopefully very serious way, presented by people with high credibility. So I believe that this is probably one of the most important things that are going on the Earth today to get this disclosure moving and going. Because, I mean, as Steve also has pointed out many times, we are on a path that is leading us in a very wrong direction. And there is only one thing that really can shake us up so much that we can start thinking otherwise, and that is the disclosure event. It has the impact needed to get people to see things in a different light and to see that we are a part of a much larger reality, and that we are just a small part of probably a very living universe that are just waiting to have us on board. So I hope this film will participate in the work of getting this out. And also I want to thank Steve and all his colleagues and all of you who are also in this movement together for the work that you are doing. It's a very important work and you're doing a great job. Thank you very much. And we have some information about the film in the back here, and you can also visit our website, newparadigm.no. Thank you.
Good, okay. Thank you so much, Terje. And next, I'd like to ask Gary Heseltine to please come back to the stage. After a brief setup, you didn't see that, of course. Gary is a police officer and a UK-based UFO researcher. I think you're going to find his information incredibly interesting. Gary.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will be making a brief press release. Okay. I'm going to cover two areas. As has just been introduced, I am a serving police detective with almost 21 years service, and I work in the UK. However, after a childhood sighting, I have had a lifetime interest in this subject, which resulted in 2002, where I actively felt compelled to become involved in some kind of active research. I'm a police officer, so the thing that I can write about is police officers. Before I just introduce some figures with regards to my work, my brief press release will relate to two areas of UFO investigation. A police database, where I encourage police officers, both serving and retired, to come forward with their UFO accounts. And secondly, I will offer some input as was already alluded to by Linda Moulton Howe and John Burroughs, about my investigation or re-investigation and my collaborative work with Charles Holt, who was at that time the Deputy Base Commander of a nuclear facility at RAF Bentwaters. Okay, police officers. In 2002, I set up a database. I am here in an unofficial capacity, and the views that I state do not represent my police force. I am here as a UFO researcher in a private capacity. In 2002, I launched an unofficial national police database called the PRUFORS Police Database. PRUFORS being the acronym for Police Reporting UFO Sightings, and it caters for serving and retired British police officers only. In 2002, when I started, I had 6 cases involving 12 officers. After 8 years of my research, I now have 357 cases going back to 1901 involving 800 British police officers. It is the tip of an iceberg. That's all I'm going to say about my work with police officers. I will now turn my attention to Rendlesham Forest. Rendlesham Forest, I had the good fortune that in December 2007, I was able to meet with Colonel Charles Holt, retired US Air Force. At the time in 1980, he was the Deputy Base Commander of what we know is a nuclear facility. And I know that personally because between 1983 and 1989, I served in the Royal Air Force as a police officer, and for 3 of my 6 years, I worked on 2 nuclear facilities, doing exactly the same kind of work that the airmen involved in this case did. So I have a kind of a unique perspective. And when I met Holt, I said there must be many more witnesses. And as John Burroughs, Linda Moulton Howe, and Holt himself has alluded to, there are many, many more witnesses in the wings. And if there was ever a green light given for people to come forward at no risk to their careers, etc., people would come forward. But what we already know, when I look at this case and with my work with Holt, is that this is an incident where multiple UFOs on at least 2 corroborated nights, possibly 3, but at least I work in the basis of evidence. I am a police officer, a detective, and I know what evidence is. And in a court of law, this would stand up. There is really good testimony to say that multiple UFOs on at least 2 nights were outside this base. And on at least 1 night, UFO beams, and as told to me by Colonel Holt, shone beams down directly into the weapons storage area, which I know to be a nuclear facility. That has to be of tremendous defence significance, not only to the UK where it took place, but has to be of world significance in terms of the US and the connection between UFOs and a definite link to nuclear facilities, and there are many, many cases around the world that do that. I want to close really by giving you the actual wording of what Holt said that Linda Moulton Howe alluded to. Okay, so I'm going to read it quote for quote and then just give you a brief conclusion about the subject as a whole from my perspective as a detective looking at what I consider the best evidence. Okay, so I'm now going to read this statement that went out on June the 25th, 2009. And I had pushed Holt, because I'm writing a film script with him to try to get this out to a much wider audience, to bring this to the world. And I said, we will need a definitive press statement from you. 29 years on, when this was written, will you give it to me? And he said yes. And this is what he said. I wish to make it perfectly clear that the UFOs I saw were structured machines moving under intelligent control and operating beyond the realm of anything I have ever seen before or since. I believe the objects that I saw at close quarter were extraterrestrial in origin, and that the security services of both the United States and England were and have been complicit in trying to subvert the significance of what occurred at Rendlesham by use of well-practiced methods of disinformation. And I will add a second paragraph that's on there that's not referred to much. But this is what he also said. I believe Gary's script, which he has endorsed, he has given me signed authority that this is his take on what's occurred. He endorses this. High-ranking officer. He said, I believe Gary's script will lift a veil of secrecy about what really happened at Rendlesham. Events that were and still are of tremendous defence significance to the United Kingdom and indeed the rest of the world. When I look at this case, among many others in the high-caliber witness categories of pilots, military, commercial, astronauts, cosmonauts, senior military figures, many senior military officers, specialists, scientists, radar operators, sonar operators. The evidence is overwhelming that there is an extraterrestrial presence visiting the Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gary. And I'd like to ask that you stay up here and invite the speakers who've already spoken to return to the stage. Stephen, Linda, John, AJ, and Richard to come back along with Gary to take a few questions from the press only.
Linda and John had to go to another meeting.
Okay, well, Linda and John will not be with us. They had to move on. But questions, please, from the press only. We're tight on time, so other questions from many audience members need to be taken outside the room after the conference.
Any press questions right now? You okay? Okay, good. All right, excellent. The speakers will be available outside. There are press releases right here. If let the press grab them first, and then after that, take whoever wants me to take them. And people will be able to chat out in the lobby. We have to vacate the room as quickly as possible. Thank you so much. It's all going to be on YouTube shortly. You can watch it there, as well as live stream. Thank you.
Do you want me to make a closing statement?
I was doing this. I had it, and I went,